Joining us tonight on the Sunday Night Sports Wrap, John Karalis, former star at Shea High School not too long ago, put up over 1,000 points there. And as you can see behind him, played at Emerson and then professionally overseas. John's been covering the NBA for a long time now. And right now he's the Celtics beat writer for Boston Sports Journal. John, thanks so much for coming on at such a critical point in the early part of the season for the Celtics here. They're 13-13. They've lost 2 games in the last 48 hours. How do we make sense of the last 2 days after the Celtics were 2 games over 500, came home and seemingly thought to have things on track?
Yeah, it's disappointing to have those 2 losses. You know, you lose to Detroit, you lose to Washington, those 2 very winnable games when you look at the schedule. But the problem with the schedule is that it's just so compact. They weren't even supposed to play today. They were supposed to have a day off, a game, a day off, and a game. But what they did is they jammed in an extra game to make up for one of the COVID cancellations. So the Celtics have been run ragged for a while. I think that's part of it. Obviously, the injuries are part of it. The team is still incomplete. Danny Ainge still has to add another player. He's got that traded player exception. So this team is still very much a work in progress. It's disappointing to see a real lack of effort out there. But I also think that these guys have got some tired legs as well.
So you can live with the result, right? You know, every once in a while you're going to lose ball games. You're going to lose 2 or 3 in a row. But I thought the most glaring thing today in the loss to Washington was the effort energy. It was the effort energy. Would you say that was the same?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they fouled a ton. And, you know, when you're out there on the court and you're not really in the position you're supposed to be in, when you're kind of tired, when your mind's not there, you reach, you make bad mistakes. It's basically dumb fouls. The Celtics were in the penalty for a long time. The Wizards hit 31 free throws in this game. 16 of those were penalty free throws when they wouldn't normally have been at the line. That is a sign of a tired team, an unfocused team, and that lack of energy really, really cost them turnovers, that lack of ball movement. Those are all hallmarks of a team that's just not focused. And when the team is moving well, passing the ball well, defending well, obviously that takes a lot of hard work. So they're, like I said, they're tired. I think they're trying to do too much individually. And I think that's because of the schedule and a lot of these, trying to make up for some of the injuries that they're going through.
5-10 in their last 15. The last couple weeks, Marcus Smart hasn't played. How tough is it to play without their leader, a guy, on the court who keeps them together, playing as a unit, and then also, the guy that starts things on the defensive end?
Well, you said it right there. The guy who keeps them together. I think the biggest impact of not having Marcus Smart is a lack of organization. He is, and many guys have said this, the heart and soul of the Boston Celtics. He's the guy that they look to. He's the longest tenured Celtic, and he keeps them organized on the defensive end. Especially, he knows what the other team is trying to do. He knows what players are, where they're going to go, where his teammates should be. And on offense, he can run a pretty efficient offense. I know people get on him for some of the shot selection things, and that's legit. But as a point guard, as a guy who runs the offense, he can really help. And he can really help keep Kemba off the ball a little bit more. And I think that's part of the evolution of this team as well. Not as much Kemba, ball dominant guy, a little bit more off the ball. So having Marcus Smart there would really help. Obviously, you would have loved to see Marcus Smart get a crack at Bradley Beal, who just got basically anything that he wanted in this game. And obviously Marcus Smart is going to bring the energy no matter what. He just is maniacal that way. So there are many different ways, not just point of attack defense, that they miss Marcus Smart.
It's hard to sustain injuries, John, when your star players don't perform. Jayson Tatum, 3 of 14 today, 6 points. You wrote in your column afterwards, 35% in the last 5 games. Is it safe to say it's a slump for Tatum?
Yeah, he's I think post-COVID, and I don't know how COVID really impacted him. He said he had some symptoms, but it could just be the return of Kemba Walker and trying to figure that out. There is a lot with this team. Tatum trying to get his right number of shots and right number of touches, and Jaylen Brown getting the right number of touches, and now factoring in Kemba Walker, who's getting more minutes and slowly rising the number of minutes that he's playing. there is kind of a reintroduction. This isn't the team that Kemba Walker came back to a year ago and signed with. So I think part of Tatum's struggles have to do with some of that as well. And again, having 5 games in 7 nights is not ideal. That's not what the NBA has been striving towards. They've been striving towards fewer games, more rest, trying to keep these guys protected. We're seeing a lot of hamstrings and calves like Marcus Smart, different soft tissue injuries that's really limiting some of the guys around the NBA. And I wouldn't be surprised if Tatum isn't 100% either. But yeah, there are a few factors there that he's definitely in the middle of a pretty bad slump.
Kemba Walker was honest with the media post-game. He said, quote, "All teams go through adversity." And then he finished up with, "But it's how you overcome it." John, what gives you hope that this Celtics team can turn it around before it gets too late?
Yeah, well, there are a few things here. First of all, I do know that help is on the way eventually within the next few weeks, probably, because the traded player exception is there for Danny Ainge to use. And we're about a month away from that trade deadline. So I think that there's going to be some help coming. I do believe that these guys are trying to work through some of these issues. I don't think that this is a sniping at one another type of thing. I think this team has been through some of these things before and has a strong chance at getting through that. I think the personalities on this team are the types that will work through that stuff. And again, health will be part of it. Marcus Smart coming back will be part of it. And here's one last thing. Home games. The Celtics have had the most road games in the NBA this year, which means there's a long stretch of playing at home. And I know fans aren't there, but being at home, being in your own home, in your own bed, with your family around, it allows just a little bit more mentally for you to just relax and work through things. So I do think that this is the worst of it, and it might not get better right away, but I do think there is reason to be positive moving forward.
Well, the Celtics back at home Tuesday night. Rubber meets the road. They've got a tough test against the Denver Nuggets, who were in the Western Conference Final just a year ago. John Karalis from BostonSportsJournal.com. You can read his work on that website. Thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me.